Last video, I showed you the loop. Figma style guide in, Claude builds it, and GitHub and Netlify keep it alive forever. But I skipped one thing on purpose. How do you decide what the site should actually look and feel like? So this video, I'm going to build the exact same website in 3 different ways. Same brand, same brief, same underlying design system. The only thing I did change was how I actually art directed it before it hit Claude Code. The first one is using a design system and a component library. The second is using the same underlying design system, but then using a 5-minute process of art direction. And then in the final example, I'll use a tool called Higgsfield AI that will show you exactly how far we can push things. It'll be the same build loop under all 3, but we're going to be spending a bit more time up front just to work through some of the different creative options that we have. These different processes will give you completely different results, and I'll show you where each one earns its keep. Quick disclaimer that everything you see in this video will be using the Bayside Physio example that I'll be using all along. There's no real patients, no real clinical data. It's a fictional brief that happens to feel like a real business, which is exactly what makes this demo so useful. I'm using the exact same design system for each of these different examples. It doesn't change across each of the 3 versions, but what does change are the prompts that I'm giving to Claude Code, and you'll see how those prompts that I'm providing dramatically change the outputs that we get. On to the first example. So this is where we landed in the last video. So we have this Bayside Physio website. As you can see here, pretty straightforward. We've got the header up the top here. We go into a bit about the story of the practice. Then we talk about what we can help with, so the different services that we offer, how it works, the team, the funding and investment, a bit about the community, FAQs, and then if you want to inquire for an appointment, we've got a form that takes inquiries. So pretty straightforward. And I already went through how we got to this point in the last video. So in the last video, I showed you how you can take a basic design style guide and then you can convert that into something that's more appropriate for web-based design. So you can see here we have a whole bunch of tokens that represent the styles that we want to include to remain consistent across all of our web-based products. And then I've also included a basic component library here. So that's really just buttons, badges, alerts, inputs, etc. And the first technique that I wanted to try was taking this very, very basic design system and turning into something a lot more sophisticated. So here you can see we have created a more sophisticated version of the style guide. So we've got all of our semantic tokens here. We have all of our typographic styles here. We've got some other stylistic options here around spacing, the different radiuses of elements, effects around elevation and shadows. And then we also have different borders and then also the sizing of elements. So we're using a 4-point grid system. Every measure will be broken down into 4 pixels. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, we have all of our components. So we're broken it down into an atomic component system. So we have atoms, which are the smallest level of components. So you can see, for example, buttons, checkboxes, filters. We have a massive set of icons, all the input fields, radio buttons, and a whole bunch more. And then we have the next layer up, that'll be molecules. So these will be a combination of atoms that will make up molecules. So as an example, before we had avatar, and then now we have avatar group. So we can see how these different components can be combined together to create new components. And you can see we have a whole bunch of those other components here as well. And then the third is organisms. So these are a bigger set of components that we can use to actually build out web pages. So you can see here we have a whole bunch of banners at the top. We have a whole bunch of headers, elements to make up a blog, elements to make up the career for job postings, and then a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So this is what you would typically use to create any sort of website, any sort of web application. You have a whole set of consistent components that you can combine together, mix and match, and you can build up as many different pages as you want. And the reason why you would do this is you want to make sure that all of your web applications and all of your websites have a consistent brand style guide that sits underneath it to make sure that everything remains consistent and everything speaks the same language visually. That was the first step to get that design system and component library all set up, just to make sure that we have a foundation to build upon. Now I've asked Claude to take a look at the initial website that I just showed you, and then to uplift it using the new design system and component library. So that's all I've really asked it to do. I haven't given it any stylistic opinions or any stylistic instructions. I've just asked it to look at the first version of the website and then look at this design system that's in Figma and to create a new version that's heavily based on that design system. And as you can see, Claude it's taken a look at the initial version first of the site, and then it's taken a look at the design system in Figma. And as I explained in the last video, I use the Figma MCP, so I don't have to export anything from Figma. I've given Claude access to my Figma account, and it can go in and have a look and see all of the design decisions that have been made there. And then you can see here, it's provided some commentary about some of the components. And then you can see it started to pull in some of those components and it's resized them based on the viewport. And then it said here that it's done. It's provided a link to the new design system version. And then it also has some commentary about what it's implemented from Figma. So it's taken the tokens and the CSS properties. It's implemented the typographic system. And then it's also pulled in the various components from Figma, and it has created a website from it. So here's that first example. So you can see pretty basic and boring. It's used all of the components that I've had listed in that Figma file directly. It's even used all of the placeholder imagery. So it's got rid of the ones that I had originally. And it's very, very similar to the one that we produced earlier, except obviously it's stripped everything back a lot more. It's probably followed the design system too much to a T. And yeah, look, nothing to phone home about here at all. Very, very basic, but at least we know that it's grounded in a consistent design system. So as we build this website out, and if we were to build another application off the back of this, then we know that everything's going to be consistent because it's all built using exactly the same elements that we defined in that design system. So as you can see, I have provided that feedback to Claude. I've said, honest take, the original GSAP version looks a lot better. Is there an advantage to actually using a design system? And it said here that yes, you're right. And the reason that is instructive, it's saying the original version has art direction, and it's provided some specific examples of the art direction that was used. The design system has been followed too faithfully in the Figma file, and it's really just a reskin of that. And you can see here, it said that it's deliberately generic, and it's really focused on structure and consistency with not really any taste. And then one of the most important bits of feedback here is the component library will always give a floor, never a ceiling. So we know that this is the worst it's going to get. We can only go up from here. And one of the key takeaways for me here is that yes, we have that design system, we have that first version. Now let's focus more on art direction to see how we can take this website to the next level. So in Figma, I've added a new tab here called art direction. Now, I definitely recommend spending a lot more time on this. I've only spent about 5 minutes or so, but I've just gone to Pinterest and I've pulled a whole bunch of examples and created essentially a mood board of different websites that I think fit the aesthetic of Bayside Physio. Obviously, it's a physiotherapy clinic that's right near the beach. Lots of sporting activities, running, marathons, triathlons, these sorts of things. This would be an aesthetic that would resonate with the customers at Bayside Physio. And you can see here, we've used blue to represent the beach. We've got a whole bunch of dynamic images, very sport focused, lots of white space, lots of big type, a lot of sort of motion blurs, and then also blue sky, sunny aesthetic and visuals coming through as well. So as I said, very, very quickly put together this mood board. Once again, spend a lot more time on this. I think the more time you spend on this, the more meaning that you can derive from these images, the better. But just for the sake of this demonstration, I wanted to do this very quickly, just so we don't have a very long video. Cool. So I've asked Claude here, let's run an experiment. I've added a new tab so we can see art direction here. Can you create a new version using the examples? And you can see Claude has looked at the new art direction page. It's seen that it's a mood board with 7 reference images and it's pulling them all through and studying them. It's using the tokens and the styles that we have from the component library and design system. But then it's also taken a athletic and editorial expression from the images, and then it's produced a new version. And then it's provided some details around some of the design decisions that it's made. But it looks like it's tried to take some of the aesthetic and styling direction from that tab or from those images, and it's pulled those through and it's expressed it in a new version. And this is the new version that it's produced. So you can see it's quite clearly taken inspiration from using the big type, displaying it in a dynamic way. It's used some of the images that were in the Figma file, particularly this marathon image. It's blown it up and it's put it in the background, and then it's created an overlay over the top. It's used animation in a few different ways. It's got this scrolling banner with some of the other information that was static. And then it's also pulled in some of the imagery from the first version. And then most of this is pretty similar to what we had before, but it's using the same kind of typographic decisions, big type, big things sitting in the background, making in some areas some of the elements off balance. And it looks to have done a pretty good job here. But obviously, as I said before, you can spend a lot more time on this. If there are certain things that you want to push further, if you wanted to create a completely different version, then you can go back and forth and have that conversation with Claude. and hopefully land on something that is a bit more aligned to what you're looking for. Now with the next version, I wanted to experiment using Higgsfield. Now Higgsfield is a platform that consolidates all of the best image and video models into one. So you can buy credits through Higgsfield, and then you get access to a whole bunch of these models, and you can create anything from images, photography, videos, animations, anything that you really want. You can get very, very creative. You can experiment, same prompt with different models and get some really surprising results. And the one thing that I did to make this easier for me was I used the Higgsfield MCP and connected that with Claude, and it was surprisingly easy to set up. So the one thing that you need to do is go to higgsfield.ai/MCP, and you can see that make sure that MCP is selected here, and then also make sure that Claude is selected there. And you can see that there is a URL down the bottom here. So click on that. In your Claude Code account, click on Customize, then click on Connectors, and then go to Add over here and go to Add Custom Connector. And here you would just simply type Higgsfield, and you would put in the URL that I copied across before straight here, and then click on Add. I've already done this, so you can see my Higgsfield MCP is already connected, and you can click on Close. Now with the Higgsfield MCP connected, I'm going to give Claude instructions to create a new website based on the other versions that we have previously provided, but I wanted to take a bit of a different approach. So I want this to be an award-winning style cinematic website. So you can see I've got here 3D scroll for Bayside Physio, and I put in some information here. I've provided a bit of information around some of the graphics that we want to include. So I've asked specifically for it to use Dance 2.0. So you can see I've provided some specific details around what I want that image to be. And then I've also gone into a bit more detail around what I want to be in the hero. So I've got here move better, live better, Bay life, some information around some of the taglines that I want to include, and then also some information around some of the privacy and some of the language that we're allowed to use for a physiotherapy clinic. Cool. And if I scroll through here, you can see I've had to do some back and forth with Higgsfield. So it's generated some images, and then I've been able to take a look at them, approve, deny, and there's been a bit of a consultation process that's gone through just to make sure that we're getting the right videos. Quite a bit of dialogue here, but I found working with Higgsfield through the MCP to be quite easy. Just took a little bit of getting used to actually go through and approve those images. So in a previous video, I showed you how I created these images using Gemini, and these were some of the images that I used as inspiration for the creative. Alrighty, so here's where we landed with that next version of the website. So you can see Bayside Physio, very clear down the bottom with the tagline. We have a person who looks like they're running in the rain. And as I start to scroll, this is essentially a video that is interactive based on scrolling. So you can imagine someone's come to the website, they're scrolling through the content, and then as they're doing so, the video is playing. So you can see here down the bottom here, look closely at a single stride. So it's gone into a bit of storytelling mode here. Keeping it easy takes looking after. So talking about strength, mobility, load, build up gradually, and then framed around your goals. So it's talking about the different plans that are available with this physiotherapy clinic, and then it gets straight into the content. So for a first attempt, I think this is pretty good. It looks like it's pretty similar structure to all of the different websites, but it's really just that hero bit that is different. And I think for a first attempt, this is a pretty good interactive website, particularly for a physiotherapy clinic. A lot of the ones that I've seen online tend to be pretty basic. You can see this one is dynamic, interactive. It really tells the story of what this physiotherapy clinic specializes in. It also creates that impactful first impression, which is what you want in a website. As soon as someone hits your website, you want to capture them straight away. And I think this website does that. But like I said, worth playing around with a bit more. But yeah, look, three different versions of how you can take a website that's quite basic into something that is hopefully a bit more impressive. Once again, I think this highlights the most important bit of these processes are the art direction and creative processes that happen right at the beginning. The better the brief, the more pointed you can be with your concepts, the more experimentation that happens in the art direction phase, the more inspiration that you collect, the more iterations that you go through, the better your outputs will be. I think using Higgsfield in this process for me was quite impressive. It's something that I definitely want to have a bit more of a play around with to see how I can take more control of the creative images that we're getting. But I think for a physiotherapy website, which are normally quite basic, I think that this one comes across as quite striking. But keen to know what you think, and looking forward to doing more of these sorts of videos, getting into the creative side of building some of these more impressive websites and digital products. So keen to hear what you think, and please drop a like and subscribe below. And if you have any feedback, please drop it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.